Welcome to the Stronger Than Steel podcast with your host, Austin Davidson and John Keir, talking Steelers all the time. Now, here's Austin and John.
Hello, and welcome back to the Stronger Than Steel podcast. My name is John Keir, co-host of this show, and as always, my other co-host is Austin Davidson.
Hello.
It's Season 3, Episode 12. We are 1 week away from the NFL Draft, Austin. It's coming fast, and we have one last position group to attend to. It is the most important position group that we've been talking about all offseason. It is the inside linebackers. Before we get to that, though, we've got quite a bit of Steelers news to get to. First and foremost, Austin, it's James Harrison, the New England Patriots linebacker, has announced his retirement from the NFL, effective immediately, according to his Instagram the other day. So just a quick rundown of Harrison's career. He played 15 years, signed with Pittsburgh as a UDFA, the first player from Kent State University to play for the Steelers since Jack Lambert back in the mid-'80s. He was cut 3 times, signed by the Ravens and was also cut by them. Played in NFL Europe early in his career. Finally got his first career start in 2004. Was a part of the Super Bowl 40 winning team. Became the starter over Porter, who was released in 2007. Earned 5 straight Pro Bowl nods. Won the 2008 Defensive Player of the Year award. Made a crucial play in the Steelers' Super Bowl 43 victory. Released in 2013, signed with the Bengals, retired after an underwhelming season, returned to the Steelers after an injury to Jarvis Jones in 2014, played there effectively for the next 2 seasons. As you know, last year, TJ Watt took his spot in 2017. He then asked for his release several times before finally being granted it, before signing with the Patriots. And as we all know, after playing only 40 snaps last year with Pittsburgh, he played in 69 in Super Bowl 52 with the New England Patriots. Another long career in the NFL, one that meant a lot to the Steelers, comes to a close. But did the end of his career with the Steelers and his last sort of hurrah with the Patriots, does that tarnish what he did in Pittsburgh? How are we going to remember James Harrison?
I think Steelers fans will remember him fondly in just a few years' time. I even think the healing process has started already. Steelers fans seem to be less mad once he said he retired. I think we will remember him as a guy that was relentless, working very hard to get where he was, getting cut multiple times and still making it to the Steelers roster at the end of the day, and contributing hardcore as a pass rusher. I will personally never forget what he did in Super Bowl against the Cardinals for the Steelers, as should no other Steeler fan. That pick six is going to be what most Steeler fans remember about him. If that should be the main thing, and I think that's what he deserves to be remembered as. I hope he comes back and signs a one-day contract with the Steelers to retire there, but I don't know about that. I feel he said there was no bad blood, but I don't think it's going to happen. What do you think? Is Steeler Nation going to get over themselves or what?
Harrison doesn't seem like the kind of guy to sign a one-day contract. He seems kind of a more an under-the-radar kind of guy that'll show up at small team events, things like that, don't you think?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't really know.
Do you think he might just disappear completely like other former players have, like Troy Polamalu?
Maybe. I mean, he might. At least what's it called? Polamalu kind of went out on sort of good terms. I mean, it basically was like, all right, you need to retire or we're cutting you. But
no, he went out on bad terms. He went out on really bad terms. He wanted to keep playing. The Steelers cut him, and he basically has not been on good terms with the organization ever since.
Really?
Yeah, no, he has not been.
Oh, okay. That's worse than I thought. I honestly I assumed it was okay. Maybe that's how Harrison goes because of the way the Steelers treated him in his final season. I'm not quite sure. Now,
it's good from the Steelers' end towards Polamalu, but he might be harboring, maybe not hatred, but he might not be too happy. He might be better now than he was when he was originally released, but at the time he was definitely not happy that he was cut. So I guess the point I'm trying to get across is I don't see Harrison as being the guy that's going to be sitting on the sidelines, during the games cheering the team on. He's certainly not that kind of a guy. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he, either stays away for a long time or if he's coming back for random events. But getting back to your original question, Austin, we're going to remember James Harrison as a crucial part of the Steelers teams that won 2 Super Bowls in the 2000s. He made some really big plays in some really big games as well. He was one of, if not the best pass rushers in the league for a few years, and certainly the most feared player in the league. He kind of carried that the torch for the Steelers defense as far as what you think about when you're talking about a smash mouth football defense, and I think he took a lot of pride in that. And obviously in Pittsburgh up until his first retirement, he was an elite player for that 5-year stretch. He was still a good player the last few years, clearly not what he once was. I think fans are still hurting right now, but I think even after a couple months after the Patriots lost the Super Bowl, maybe it would have been different if they won, but I think fans kind of saw that loss almost as karma in the Super Bowl, and they've kind of since then have moved on a bit. I remember we made a big deal about that one Twitter account. What is it, Blitzburg 4? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I sort of do.
One Twitter account was just absolutely losing their mind that James Harrison signed with the Patriots, and they were, just calling him a snake and all that stuff. And I saw them on Twitter the other day. I don't think they seem nearly as bad now. So I think the fans maybe overreacted a bit, and I'm sure some were still upset. But the old saying is time heals all wounds. So I think at some point the Steelers fans are going to look back on his career favorably, even despite the messy ending that it could have at one point been remembered for. The next question, though, is James Harrison a Pro Football Hall of Famer?
I gotta say no, just not enough sack production is the easy answer for me. You compare him to the other pass rushing linebackers that have gotten in, and he just doesn't really match their stats. He doesn't have enough for me to say he's going to make the Pro Football Hall of Fame. What do you think?
It's a no from me. It's close. It definitely takes some thought and consideration. But even, I think it's a lot closer now than it was at the time of his first retirement. I think he did himself good by playing another 3 to 4 years and staying in the league a little bit longer, adding to his numbers, becoming the Steelers' all-time sack leader. But ultimately, what's going to hurt him is the fact that his career didn't really start until he was 29. For the first 5 years of his career, he was being cut, playing special teams, being seen as a guy that didn't really try hard enough. But, he turned it around, had a dominant 5-year stretch of football with a signature play in the biggest game of the year. I think that'll make it a borderline kind of situation. Maybe eventually he makes it in, but he's definitely not first ballot. It's borderline right now, so maybe it'll change, because we also said Hines Ward's definitely a Hall of Famer, and it's looking more and more like he never will be. So, time will tell, but I think right now it's borderline, with a maybe in the coming future. So, that being the case, where does he rank all-time among Steeler greats? Is he a all-time Steeler great? And I guess, what do you define as an all-time great? Because, a lot of franchises, that would be like their top 10 best players. But the Steelers are kind of a unique team in that they've had so many great players in their history. Is he a top 20 player? Like, what is an all-time great to you, and where does he end up on that list?
I think he is. He's not like one of the super top ones, but like of defensive players, he's probably top 15. If you factor in all players, the more tough sellers, he'd probably be outside of 30 that way. But honestly, this question was hard, though. It's just, I feel like if it was another team that didn't have such a great history, the answer would be yes. He'd totally be a all-time great. But personally, for me, an all-time great is any guy that was just great. The list doesn't have to be end at a certain number or have to be a top 30, top 50, top 10. I feel like it goes until they don't have any more greats. I feel like James Harrison will be a great. He's just not going to be one of the super top ones for the Steelers. The list keeps on going. I can't really say that, because I feel like there are contributors for the Steelers that weren't as good as other contributors, but they still contributed something. They still did really great for the Steelers, and I feel like that's still recognizable, and that still makes them the Steelers great. I don't know. What do you think on the subject?
The other thing is that it's so hard to compare players between generations because of just how much the game changes in that amount of time. But I try to take everything without bias as much as I can, and I try to recognize the greatness that I've heard and I've seen from players that I haven't seen play, because Harrison is one of the best players I've ever seen play for the Steelers. But at the same time, I try to recognize what other all-time greats did in the 70s Steelers defense. So, I mean, let's put it this way. You and I agree on this. Harrison was never the best defensive player when he was in Pittsburgh, and for that matter, he was never the best defensive player anywhere he was. When he was in Pittsburgh in his earlier years, it was always Troy Polamalu. He was washed up, if you will, certainly out of his prime by the time he went to Cincinnati and came back, and Cameron Hayward was the best defensive player at that time. That doesn't do him good. And then I can think of 7 Steelers defensive players that probably were more impactful than he was, or at least are known to be more dominant players at their time, and those being Ernie Stautner, the defensive lineman in the 1960s, first Steeler to get his number retired. Obviously, Mean Joe Green. You have Jack Ham, many considered the best outside linebacker ever. Mel Blount, who changed the rules at the cornerback position. Rod Woodson, the do-it-all safety, cornerback, defensive back, punt returner. Troy Polamalu, the guy who was the best player on that defense, and Jack Lambert, who, if you want to have an argument, maybe it's Jack Lambert because some people think he's overrated, but I'd have a hard time saying Harrison is better than those guys. So when you talk about 7 players right there, that doesn't even factor in offensive players like Bradshaw, Brown, Roethlisberger, Harris, Webster, Dawson. I'm missing a lot right there too. That's not a set list right there either. So you're talking about pushing him maybe down to 15th or 20th on the all-time list. And again, that could be an all-time greats list. And I like your kind of fluid idea of all-time greats is still a great player. But I don't know. I'd have a hard time putting him inside the top 15 just because of all the wonderfully talented players the Steelers have had in their time. But again, it should not take away from the great career he had in Pittsburgh and in the NFL. So I guess outside of the Arizona Cardinals Super Bowl 43 play, what do you most remember him for?
That's really hard question, actually. Outside of that, is there really a play that sticks out to me? That's what I'm trying to think. I'm trying to remember a play that's like
so many plays
really
are so
what define James Harrison. I'm actually struggling right now. You care to take over?
I was just thinking there's so many plays that are so similar, where it's like that effort that showing off the weight room stuff, and you see it in action in the game. Maybe it's one of those hits that he laid on when the NFL was becoming more conscious of head injuries, and all of a sudden he became flagged as a dirty player. There are 2 hits that come to mind, or honestly 3 plays that I'm thinking of now that come to mind. One game against Cleveland in 2010, he knocked out Josh Cribbs and Mohamed Massaquoi. That ended up being on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I'll find you a picture of that, Austin, because I actually remember that play and that cover. But I'm thinking of that game with those 2 hits, and I'm thinking of a game in 2011 against the Ravens where Harrison was rushing Joe Flacco, and I think Ray Rice went to cut block him, and he just leapt over him, just completely hurdled him on the way to the quarterback, and he didn't get a sack, but I think that told you everything you needed to know about who James Harrison, what he was all about. So I sent you the link of the picture I was thinking of. Were there any other plays you could think about?
Only other one I could think of, it was really early on. It might be what actually opened it, because after you said a Browns hit, I don't know if it's on Cribbs, but it was very early on in his career. Let's see if I can even remember the Browns quarterback at the time. There's so many of them. He just completely came in and laid out a Browns receiver. He was just doing a small crossing route, nothing really spectacular.
That's the play, Austin. That's the play I was talking about.
Oh, it was? Okay, it was Josh Cribbs. Okay, then yeah, that's all. Because that I was like, that sounds familiar. It was something else, but I guess it was the same thing. So
the crossing route was Mohamed Massaquoi, and it was a running play where he knocked out Cribbs, and then the next year he knocked out Colt McCoy too.
He just did good at just smashing people. Oh yeah, that's definitely it. That is definitely the play that you were talking about.
Yep. So, in any case, James Harrison, wonderful career. It's it also makes you feel a little bit older. So a guy that I grew up watching play football is now retired as well. But life goes on, and so does life in the NFL. And speaking of life in the NFL, it's going to be difficult for the Steelers with their current linebacker group, wouldn't you say? You've had a chance to look at the current position players on the team. Obviously, they're missing Ryan Shazier, but what do they have behind him right now?
Well, not a lot for long is what I had to say. All these guys the Steelers only have 1 or 2 years left on their contract, which is not quite ideal. Anyhow, let's start with the probable starters for the season, and Vince Williams and John Bostic. Williams is one of my favorite Steelers right now. He's not like elite or anything, but I feel like he's real, and I like the way he carries himself. Still, he can play. In his first year starting, he proved he could handle Lawrence Timmons' old job and did it pretty effectively. He definitely contributed in the sack department, and that was unexpected for me. He showed better speed and pass rush skills than I had thought, but still, he has room for improvement, as that final game against the Jaguars was pretty rough for him and basically everyone else on the defense as well. But still, moving on to Bostic, he's a newcomer around here and should keep the Steelers from getting absolutely manhandled by runs down the middle anymore. Without Shazier, they really had that problem. And he should be a guy who's faster than Sean Spence, who can actually make the tackle. Again, though, Bostic isn't all that great either, but he will stop the Steelers from getting destroyed and instead offers them a chance to stop the run. It gives them at least a chance. Next, I want to talk Tyler Matakevich, as I find him to be one of the most interesting players on the Steelers roster, which might sound ridiculous as he's just a backup inside linebacker, but last year I questioned why the Steelers outsourced their inside linebacker job when they had him on the roster, but news broke that he only didn't start because of a bad shoulder and a shoulder he needed surgery on. And that means he could actually be challenging Bostic to be the day one starter for the Steelers. And I find that interesting. I feel like he could be the surprise for the Steelers, for Steelers fans this upcoming year if they decide not to go inside linebacker early. Next up is LJ Ford, and honestly, it's really time for the Steelers to just cut him. They trusted Sean Spence over him. Was it a mistake? Probably, but if the Steelers are going to embrace that they think Sean Spence is better than LJ Ford, Ford shouldn't be rostered. And they cut Sean Spence, but LJ Fort's still on the roster. It's just, I don't know. It doesn't equate in my mind why that's a thing. Why is that happening? They literally took a guy, said he's better than someone you already had on the roster, brought him in, and then cut him because he wasn't that good. But still, the other guy that was apparently worse still makes the roster. It's just, okay, I get it. Maybe it's for depth purposes going into this year. Maybe it's just so he's a camp body, but you can't find another undrafted free agent camp body for now. If that, you really don't think highly of Ford. It's just he shouldn't be there. Then speaking of camp bodies, the other two guys, Matt Galambos and Keith Kelsey, are basically just camp bodies. I suppose they could try and make a run at the roster, but I highly doubt it. But what do you think of the Steelers' inside linebacker depth?
Yeah, well, I mean, you covered it pretty well. Obviously, Shazier was the star of this unit, and he was the top of the line guy, but let's look at this group now compared to where it was 4 months ago. It's not terrible. Sean Spence has been replaced by John Bostic, which is a pretty good upgrade. Excuse me. And Tyler Matakevich should be healthy by now. Obviously, though, as I mentioned, This group was missing a number one guy, a guy that can play every down, a guy who can be reliable in run support and in pass coverage. And yes, we talked about Vince Williams. He had a breakout campaign in 2017 before Shazier's injury. That really slowed him down. He was tasked with doing a lot more than he was normally doing when Shazier was healthy, and it was clear that he wasn't very comfortable with it. And he wasn't as impactful and effective as he had been prior to the injury. Aside him is Bostic, the newcomer from the Indianapolis Colts. He's looking like the starter opposite Williams right now, and he was productive a year ago. Time will tell if he is going to be the starter or if he'll become the first backup. He shows good potential to possibly play important snaps next year, even if he's not the guy. Matakevich was pushed down the depth chart, but that's okay. He never seemed to be too much more than a special teams ace anyways at the time, although every year in training camp, Steelers fans will have you believing otherwise. But, it's good to see him back in that role. Maybe he can become a little bit more than that. The coaches really do like him, so maybe we will see a little bit more of him next year. And then LJ Fort's just a special teams guy right now. Galambos and Kelsey are camp bodies, as you said, with the outside shot to make the roster as special teams contributors should LJ Fort and Matakevich be injured or be completely ineffective. All right. Obviously, the only loss we're talking about, none in free agency, it's just the injury to Ryan Shazier. There isn't a free agency need at this position because the Steelers already addressed it with the signing of John Bostic last month. On the flip side, though, let's be perfectly clear. We've said all offseason that this was the highest position of need, and I think we said last year it was the second highest position of need, only behind edge rusher, and we kept saying the Steelers should have addressed it last year. They didn't, and their greatest fears about the position came to be realized, as we saw last year. How high on a scale of 10 do the Steelers need an inside linebacker in this draft?
In this draft, it's definitely probably about like a 10. It's as high as it could really go. Because regardless of what you're doing, you also have to consider that next year, if Shazier actually does come back, if Shazier actually is healthy, you have to consider the possibility that Vince Williams doesn't stay. And now you have Shazier and the rookie that you drafted on the field together. Because Vince Williams only has 1 year left on his contract. And it would it would be a very hard decision for the Steelers to make. It really would. If this year the Steelers draft a first-round inside linebacker, and then you find out that Shazier is definitely coming back to play, it's going to be very hard to keep him on the roster. I mean, maybe you do because you don't know Shazier is going to return to how he was, but still, that's a question for another day. What do you rank inside linebacker on a scale of 1 to 10? I'm sorry, I got away from the question.
11. They need 1, maybe 2 in this draft. They need someone that can patrol the middle, someone that can go sideline to sideline, an athletic player, and they need someone that can get to holes quickly. They need a playmaker, and it really sucks because they need to get Shazier again, but there isn't someone like that in the draft at this point that they can get at their current draft position at number 28, so they'll have to stick with someone else and hope that it works out. So I guess in that case, there are some interesting prospects for sure, and we're not going to take a look, I'll tell you right off the bat, we're not looking at the top guys, Tremaine Edmonds and Roquan Smith from Virginia Tech and Georgia, just because there's no chance the Steelers are getting them, unless if for some reason they trade up, which is it's completely unprecedented for the Steelers to do that. They don't trade up, especially up that far to where they're projected to be taken. I suppose it's possible they fall, but I don't see any way that Smith or Edmonds fall to Pittsburgh. So we decided to just completely overlook them for the time being. And if for some reason they end up in Pittsburgh, I think we'll be doing backflips, won't we?
Yeah, the last time they traded up was probably for Troy Polamalu in the first round, right? I can't think of anything in between there where they traded up in the first round. I mean, that worked out, but again, it's not something that happens often at all, and they have to really love a player. And I mean, I guess Tremaine Edmonds, being 19 years old, might be a player that they would love, but like John said, they are not going to fall. They are not going to fall very. I can't imagine either of them getting past pick number 14. And I just can't see the Steelers trading up that far because they're already missing a bunch of picks. Like, they would probably have to give up quite a lot to get up there. So I don't think that the Steelers getting them. But I would be ecstatic if Tremaine Edmonds was brought into the Steelers. That would be awesome.
Would you rather have Roquan Smith or Edmonds if you were Pittsburgh right now?
I personally like Edmonds better. I think being 19 years old and already like in an athletic family, as you guys heard from, if you listen to the safety podcast, I looked at Terrell Edmonds. I looked at his like entire family pretty briefly. They're an athletic family. It just runs in their genes to be pretty good. So I'm a personal fan of Edmonds for his speed and for his youth and for everything he can contribute. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'd prefer Smith just because he played in the SEC, and I always like players that play in the SEC. But in any case, I was thinking about the whole trading up thing, and for every time you trade up and you get a Troy Polamalu, the Steelers traded up in the 4th round or 3rd round a few years ago, and they got Shamarko Thomas. So just because you trade up, it doesn't mean you're going to get a good player either. All right, so I guess let's start looking at some of those prospects, and I know the first one you looked at was one of your personal favorites throughout this whole process. After looking at him, are you still as high on him as you were?
I actually am, and that guy is Leighton Vander Esch from Boise State. He's 6'4" and 256 pounds. I still like him just as much, basically. He was the guy I wanted. He actually probably got better, but many mocks have Vander Esch going to the Steelers. Thus, he was the prime prospect for me to look at. He started his sports career in high school great, leading Salmon River High to state titles in football and basketball in both his junior and senior seasons. In his freshman year, he didn't really get to hit the field much, only playing in 8 games, but still getting 20 tackles, 1 for a loss, a pass defense, as well as a fumble recovery. He would have taken on a bigger role in his sophomore season in 2016, but unfortunately, he played less games due to injury, only playing in 6. He still got himself 27 tackles, 3.5 for a loss, and a sack, as well as an interception. But what was really great was this past season. He won 2017 Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year and had several productive games, including in the Las Vegas Bowl, where he got 12 tackles, 3 for a loss, a sack, as well as a forced fumble. Then in the Mountain West Championship game, he was named the MVP for a whopping 16 tackles, as well as a game-sealing interception. That season, he earned himself first-team all-conference for a total of 141 stops, 8.5 for a loss, 4 sacks, 4 pass breakups, and 4 forced fumbles. Following this fantastic season, Leighton Vander Esch decided to bypass his senior season and headed straight to the NFL. So, what's good about him is he's 6'4" and 256 pounds. Vander Esch is big and also long, but don't let that confuse you. As I mentioned before, he had basketball background and is very athletic with his big stature. He still maintains a high level of agility and quick twitch movements for some lateral movements. Speaking of that lateral movement, he takes almost no time to change direction. He's just so quick to redirect himself, making him a sideline-to-sideline threat. Especially combined with his range and quick bursts of the ball, he's all over the field. Then as a tackler, he's pretty great. From his tape, he seems to be best against the run, but in general, he wraps up all his tackles and makes sure to widen his frame to envelop his target. Even when he misses or over-pursues, he has the athletic ability to recover and make the tackle anyway. Then, when in coverage, he moves quickly but smoothly with fluid hips, especially shown in his drops. He's also very talented in coverage. He has proven he can handle basically any assignment that is thrown his way. He's become pretty good at both breaking up passes as well as intercepting them, as he is really good at following the quarterback's eyes, closing space quickly while still following. And then as an edge rusher, he looks to show real talent. He has the instincts to be great rushing down the middle and may even be able to beat out tackles on the edge occasionally. So what's not so good about him, if you probably heard from the overview, you probably only heard 1 year of good stats, and that's because we're taking everything we know about him from one season starting. Sure, it was a great season, but it could have just been a fluke, so that's really something to consider. It's the only season we got to see him. He bypassed his senior season to come straight to the NFL, and he obviously was hurt in his sophomore season, and in freshman he wasn't really playing, so this is all we got on him. That basically a lot of his other problems had to do with strength. He's not maxed out and is still working out on filling his frame, which would be good for him. Maxing out his frame would be good for him, as his play strength is lacking, and he could do with some more real strength. Since he's missing a bit of strength, he has struggled taking on blocks at times and gets absolutely destroyed by down blocks. Sometimes he tries to avoid blockers entirely because of this, causing him to over-pursue or run himself out of position to try and play faster and avoid those blocks. Then sometimes he has shut himself down from tackle opportunities by attacking blockers with his lead shoulder and getting himself stopped. Then finally, he really has to learn to use his hands effectively to get a nice punch as well as create separation for himself. So from this 1 year from Van Der Esch, he looked fantastic, but that's all we really have, this one season. It's almost taking a gamble to take him. It's hoping he stays the same, but he really has flashed greatness. He has earned himself comparisons to Carlos Dansby when Dansby was in his prime, and that's a solid comparison in my eyes. Van Der Esch also impressed in his pro day, and before then he was likely to be there for the Steelers pick, but now it's more of a 50-50 chance if he's there or not. So my projection is he's going somewhere between picks 20 and 30. I can't really see him falling out of the first after he pressed on his pro day. If he's there for the Steelers, I can't imagine the Steelers skipping out on him to pick someone else. It would really be the greatest mistake I've ever seen. I will be upset. That is going to be something that really hurts my soul if he's there and the Steelers just say no and just move on. But that is my first prospect. That is Leighton Van Der Esch of Boise State. Who is your first prospect?
Let me ask you first. Did you like watching the highlight tape at Boise State with their blue turf?
Oh, I loved watching the highlight tape. It was really great. I like their blue turf. Yep. I'm just watching his highlight tape right now. He is definitely athletic. The other player, my first prospect that I looked at, you've probably heard of his name as well. He's also been mocked to the Steelers throughout the course of the offseason. It's Rashaan Evans from Alabama. So you might be shaking your head because Evans is from Alabama, and players from Alabama aren't typically selected by the Steelers. In fact, I think the last Steeler selected from Alabama was Deshae Townsend in, 1998, something like that? But hear me out. The 6'3", 234-pound senior, he came up from a strong football background in Auburn, Alabama. He committed to the Crimson Tide, and some locals did not like that. In fact, they actually threatened his family and his family's local business, making his path to stardom a little more difficult. But he put that behind him growing up, and he made an immediate impact as a freshman on special teams, playing in 8 games and making 15 tackles, adding 2 for a loss and 1 sack. He was a reserve again in 2015. He had 2 sacks in the national championship game, though, that put him on scouts' radar. And he waited patiently in 2016, again playing mostly as a reserve, but he did so with some good impact in 2 starts, making 18 tackles in those 2 games. He had 53 on the season and added 4 sacks and a forced fumble. Last year was when he really broke out, though. His coach's faith in him paid off, as he started 12 games, becoming an all-SEC selection, while he tied for the team lead with 74 tackles, and he had 6 sacks while breaking up 3 passes. So, what's great about Evans' game is that he looks just like the prototypical inside linebacker of today's NFL. He has good length and great speed on tape, and he looks really muscular, too. He diagnoses the play quickly in coverage, and he gets to his target in a hurry. When you watch his highlight tape, you can clearly see that he's a great athlete and will range from sideline to sideline with great agility. Scouts duly noted his explosiveness in his play as well. His speed gives him the chance to counter jet sweeps and elusive running backs, yet at the same time he displays good patience when the offense is running misdirection plays like counters and other plays that try to throw off aggressive defenders. Scouts say that he can get past blocks quickly without giving up his gap assignments, and that he has the athleticism to move from gap to gap before finding the ball carrier, and he finishes with great physicality, which was supported by his tape. On almost every tackle he made, I felt like he was driving the opponent backwards. Obviously, though, since he was at Alabama,
he learned behind a lot of NFL talent before he became a starter, so he learned and adapted their work ethic and demeanor. He didn't miss a ton of tackles last year, and that's aided by the fact that he always keeps his head up through the tackle. That's very important for a linebacker, and after a groin injury in 2017, we learned that he can play through pain as well. He did show ability as a pass rusher too, with a powerful burst in the middle and on the edge too. He was pretty effective in delayed blitzes and showed a nice spin move to counter blockers in both the running game and the passing game. All right, but the big concern about Evans, though, although he's done a lot of things very well, teams are concerned about his lack of participation at the combine and his pro day after his nagging groin injury. Beyond that, he doesn't do a great job diagnosing plays as well as the other top prospects in this inside linebacker draft class. Also, because he was a starter for only one full year, just like Vander Esch, he doesn't have the instincts that you'd want from your starters right away. He's patient on plays that are in front of him, but on perimeter running plays, he's too aggressive, and he can get ahead of blockers, which might sound good in theory, but that can force him to a cutback lane that's open that he might not have noticed. He doesn't have great leverage when engaged with the lineman, and he can get stuck on the second level. Also, something to consider about Evans and really all players coming out of Alabama is that he benefited from playing on a great defense, and there was a lot of talent in front of him. Sometimes he's not decisive enough when there's a chance to bring down the running back in a downhill situation, and he doesn't have a ton of experience in coverage, and therefore teams are going to have to hope that his athleticism early on is going to be enough to stick to receiving targets. And then I mentioned his groin injury. He suffered it last year, and it's something that lingered on into the NFL draft process, so that's something you're really going to have to keep your eyes on with Rashaan Evans. So the bottom line about Rashaan Evans is that he grew a lot in his final season at Tuscaloosa. He has the speed to fly from sideline to sideline and certainly has an improved position, an improved feel for the position based on last year. His attitude in his first 3 years helped make his transition to the starting lineup smooth, and he had great performances in 3 straight national championship games, so he knows how to play and deliver on the biggest stage. Evans fits in well as an inside linebacker in a 3-4 defense, or even a weak side outside linebacker in a 4-3. He was originally projected as a mid-first-round pick, but questions about his durability with a groin injury have pushed him back to as far as the early second round, so it's possible that he's going to be on the board when the Steelers are picking in the first round. So keep your eye out for Rashaan Evans of Alabama. Him and Vander Esch are certainly the top 2 inside linebacker prospects that I would say you would need to keep your eyes on if I were you, Austin. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think they're the ones that are most likely to be there for the Steelers pick, because obviously, as we said, Tremaine Edmonds and Roquan Smith aren't going to be there more than likely. So I think those 2 are the biggest to keep your eyes on. If they aren't on the board anymore when the Steelers pick, you can almost basically assume that the Steelers are either moving on to safety or edge, because there's no other inside linebacker that's probably worth using that first-round pick on, or even making a surprise and just moving back to the second round if they really don't like what's they're being handed. But I highly doubt that.
Completely agree with you, Austin. So just in case those guys aren't on the board and the Steelers are still looking for an inside linebacker in rounds that aren't the first round, what's another name that Steelers fans should look at?
Yep, they still need another one. So my second prospect is Micah Kaiser from Virginia. He's 6'2" and 240 pounds. And in case it isn't clear, he's number 53 in the picture. There's a bunch of defenders there, but he is number 53. So Kaiser came out of high school as a 2-time All-Maryland pick, as well as Baltimore Sun's co-defensive player of the year in 2012. As a freshman, he made 15 tackles in 12 games as a reserve player, tying the team lead with 9 stops on special teams. In 2015 is where he got to play a bit on defense and finished as a second-team All-ACC honoree with a conference-leading 115 tackles, 13 being for a loss, 7.5 sacks, and 3 forced fumbles. In his junior year, he got even better, upgrading his status to an All-ACC pick, as well as an Associate Press to All-American for ranking 3rd in the country with 11.2 tackles per game, 134 total, 10 being for a loss, 6.5 sacks, 7 pass breakups, and finally tied for 5th in the FBS with 5 forced fumbles. In 2017, his tackle production stayed up there with the best of them, getting 145 tackles, 9.5 for a loss, 5 sacks, 4 passes defense, and 2 fumble recoveries, earning himself third-team AP All-American and first-team All-ACC honors. So, to start off with him, he is built with a solid base and frame just meant to smash people. He does just that, as he is a tough guy that doesn't shy away from contact. Where he's best is probably against the run, as he's quick to analyze what's happening and react to it, and he likes meeting running backs at the line of scrimmage rather than waiting for them to get to him. He also recognizes cutback lanes and knows how to fill those gaps to lock up the runner. Then against the blockers, he can really give it to a second-level climbing blocker with his stiff shoulder and or a powerful punch, and he has the play strength and leverage to be able to work under a blocker's pads. Then a good thing about him is he never over-pursues. He always gets to right where he needs to go. Then finally, he's just been a tackling machine. His total production is staggering with 397 total tackles, 33 and a half, going for a loss, 19 sacks, and 8 forced fumbles in only 3 years starting. So while he has a decent frame, he doesn't have the range you'd want as an NFL linebacker, and he plays with bundled hips that limit both his bend and movement. Speaking of his movement, he really lacks all sorts of speed. He uses short steps, and that gives him such a small burst, and combining that with his below-average play speed, and it makes it pretty difficult for him to get the tackle angle on his target once he gets there. It's just the speed that he has is just not good. Kaiser also has a flow of lateral movements that take time to speed up, so he needs to diagnose a player early to make sure he gets there. Then as a tackler, he's got to do a better job at dropping his pad level and securing tackles, because even though he has a lot of tackles, he has a lot of missed tackles as well. Then also as a tackler, running backs have shown to be able to drive through him and fall forward to get those extra few yards after contact. In coverage, it's as simple as this. He can't play man. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. He is an absolute liability in man, and any team that drafts him and tries is asking to get dunked on. It's just, he absolutely cannot play man on any play. If a team wants to use him and if wants to switch to man, they're going to have to take him out. It's not something that's going to happen. Despite seemingly having a lot of physical or athletic issues, Kaiser has found a way to fight it to be very productive in his time at Virginia. Like, come on, man. In his past 3 seasons, he's averaging over 131 tackles a season. That's a lot of production, but there's still some things holding him back. A team that plays mostly man coverage has no chance of taking him unless they expect him to take a role in special teams, and that's all they want from him. Still, though, for a team that runs mostly zone coverage, Kaiser has shown a lot of toughness and hit power to like and take a chance on either the 4th or 5th round. So that is Micah Kaiser out of Virginia. And again, he is number 53. Who is your second prospect?
My second prospect is Jerome Baker out of the Ohio State, if you will. He's a little bit smaller than the other prospects I looked at. He's 6'1" and 229 pounds, declaring for the draft after his junior season. Baker had a fitting end to his high school career. He actually played at the Horseshoe in Columbus in his final high school game, where he would eventually start playing in his college football career the following fall. Despite being listed as a top 10 outside linebacker coming out of high school, he was originally a reserve his freshman year. He did play in the final 7 games of the season and made 3 tackles in his freshman season. An injury led him to becoming a full-time starter in 2016, and he parlayed that into an All-Big Ten honorable mention by making 83 tackles, 9.5 for a loss, and adding 3.5 sacks as he started in 12 of a possible 13 games. He also had a pick 6 against Baker Mayfield, another NFL prospect in this year's draft, that he returned 68 yards for a score as well. He earned all Big Ten honorable mentions again in 2017 by leading the Buckeyes with 72 tackles, adding 8 of those for a loss, and racking up 3.5 sacks while breaking up 3 passes in 13 starts. So, with Baker, the thing you notice right away is that he's a fluid and fast linebacker. His technique is pretty smooth in the open field, and he can get around the field with ease. His speed and agility give him a lot of range as a tackler, and his quickness helps him elude some blockers, mostly the bigger offensive linemen, and he bounces off some blocks and can slide through from gap to gap because of his good balance. He's an underrated player in pursuit as well, as he lets his athleticism handle his speed and handle speed and more elusive ball carriers in space. This was actually evidenced when he went up against one of the top prospects in this year's draft, Saquon Barkley from Penn State. He shadowed him for most of the game and actually did a pretty good job containing him for the most part. His footwork is quick and efficient, allowing him to stick with some slower possession receivers, and he can even stick with some receivers on vertical routes. This means he can probably cover tight ends up the seam too. Even though he's not the fastest when it comes to diagnosing plays, his speed is that great that he can actually make up for lost time because he's slow at diagnosing the play right now. When he gets better at that, he'll be a much better weapon to utilize in the middle of the defense. Unfortunately, though, for Baker, he's not that big and he can get overwhelmed. It was pretty clear to see that on tape, too. He looks a little small for the position and he plays like it, too. He lacks the play strength and base on his current frame to withstand powerful blockers. When engaged, he struggles to break free from blockers as well. His instincts, as I mentioned, are not great, and while his speed can make up for slow diagnoses on some plays, it can negatively affect him on passing or running plays. He'll also wait for running backs to come to him rather than challenging them downhill. This is a concern, especially because coaches noted that he doesn't have a nastiness that you usually associate with an inside linebacker who anchors the middle of your defense. He can be pushed all around the field by a big and physical line, too. He ducks his head into contact, which is not only dangerous, but it leads to a lot of missed tackles. He's a little too aggressive on outside running plays, and he can flow past his assigned gap responsibilities too often, and scouts have noticed that his motor will run cold at times too, so a lot of problems with Baker despite all the good that I mentioned before. Bottom line with Jerome Baker, though, he's an interesting prospect, certainly not the prototypical nasty and tough linebacker you would think of. In fact, he's got serious questions about his physicality alone. It's interesting, though, because athletically, he seems to be exactly what the Steelers need, at least in coverage, and he can squeeze routes in man or zone coverage, as a matter of fact, and he has great speed and coverage talent, but unless his instincts and strength improve, he may not be able to become a starter in this league. He's being mocked between the second and third rounds, but he could very easily fall because teams are not sure if he has the toughness required to play in the NFL. Nonetheless, an interesting option, though, Austin. So, who is your third inside linebacker prospect?
My third inside linebacker prospect is Josie Jewell from Iowa. He's 6'1" and 235 pounds. I know this makes no sense given what Jewell looks like and his position, but every time I watch his tape, I was reminded of Palomalu. Not because of his play, but because, as you'll see in the picture, Iowa's jersey looks exactly like the Steelers, and he wears 43. Anyhow, I just wanted to share that because every time I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's Palomalu, when it's not. Anyhow, actually about him, he was highly recruited out of high school despite earning all-state honors in both football. I'm sorry, he wasn't highly recruited out of high school despite earning all-state honors in both football and baseball. However, Iowa scooped him up from Division III Luther College, which was located in his hometown of Decorah, Iowa, and that's where he really began to shine. As a freshman at Iowa, he played in 11 games, including 4 starts, and got 51 tackles, 1 being for a loss. Then in 2015, he got better and got a bit of recognition, winning the team's MVP in the 2015 TaxSlayer.com Bowl with 14 tackles and also was voted as second-team All-Conference at middle linebacker as he led Iowa with 126 tackles, 7.5 being for a loss, and also intercepted the ball in each of his last 3 games that year. In his junior season, he was a finalist for the Butkus Award as the nation's top linebacker, Iowa's MVP, and was a second-team All-Big Ten honoree with 124 tackles, 6 for a loss, 2 sacks, and 9 pass breakups. In his final year, he finished high and mighty, finally getting first-team All-Big Ten as well as first-team AP All-American with 134 tackles, 13.5 for a loss, 4.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 11 passes defensed, and 1 forced fumble. So probably the best thing about Jewell is his reaction speed. He plays with fast-working eyes, and it helps him see what's going on and immediately hits the gas to get to the ball. He also has a quick recovery against play action as well as misdirections. Then he actually really he does pretty solid against blocks. He spends a lot of time watching tape and really has an understanding of blocking scheme. So he plays ahead of workup blocks, and also combining with his knowledge combining this knowledge with his great hands in handling blockers, he can really hold his own. His consistent tape watching has also helped him be able to sniff out screens pretty well in his time at college. Then in coverage, he's pretty good at reading a quarterback's eyes and squeezes routes from the zone, and it's resulted in a lot of pass defense in the past 3 years, 24 to be exact. Then finally, as a tackler, he's pretty great as he applies discipline, technique, and patience to avoid missed and broken tackles, and can also lay a nice hit when necessary. So what's not so good about him is he really lacks the speed and loose long frame you would want. He ran a really slow 40-yard dash, the third slowest of this year's combine for an inside linebacker, actually. He just lacks the short area of foot quickness, which is definitely a concern. He also doesn't really have the overall reactive athleticism. It's not bad, it's just average. Then he sometimes struggles against blocks in two ways. The first being that he ducks his head into the initial take-on block, and the second is that sometimes he just gets completely devoured by sizable blockers and gets stuck on them. Basically, he's going to need to get better at slipping out of blocks rather than going in head-on when he gets to the NFL. Then in coverage, his tight hips prevent him from transitioning nicely in man coverage, and is shown to struggle to get depth early on his dropbacks. Finally, he's been using mostly effort in college as a blitzer, but going into the NFL, that's not going to work just using talent alone. So, Tua was expected to run faster at the combine, as people were saying he would, but he didn't, and he showed to be pretty slow. It's really going to hold him back. That and his frame, both are unchangeable problems, really, so that's something a team is going to have to accept. He does have a lot of good to him, though. To make up for his lack of speed and size, he worked hard on studying tape to understand all sorts of offensive schemes. So a team may take him just for his football smarts alone. Analysts have him going in the 5th or 6th round, but I can't actually see him going. I can actually see him going at the far back end of the 3rd or somewhere in the 4th. I think he's being underrated by analysts quite a bit, to be honest with you. This was the first prospect where I looked at them and I was like, 5th or 6th round, really? I was mostly expecting 3rd or 4th. I guess they expect their speed to hold him back more, but I don't really see it. So that is Josie Jewell out of Iowa. Who is your 3rd prospect?
My 3rd prospect is a team captain from the University of Michigan, Mike McCray, and he actually has good pedigree, but the Ohio native broke the hearts of the Buckeye faithful in 2012 after being named the AP Division II Defensive Player of the Year. As I mentioned, he went to Michigan, so that certainly did not sit over well with the Ohio faithful. McCray redshirted in 2013 before earning some playing time as a reserve in 2014. He played in 14 games and added 2 tackles, 1 for a loss, and added a blocked punt and special teams action. He actually missed the entire 2015 season with several injuries, including one to his shoulder. In 2016, he stepped into the fold, though, as he played in all 13 games and earned all Big Ten honors with 76 tackles, 12.5 for a loss, 4.5 sacks, and 9 pass breakups. And then last year, he had 79 tackles, 16 for a loss, with 4.5 sacks and a forced fumble. What's great about McCray is that he comes from a leadership background. His father was not only a player at Ohio State, he was also a linebacker and a team captain. So you can tell that McCray's been around the game his whole life. Nothing seems to surprise him. He plays smart and he's a downhill and physical defender. He also looks to try and play as big as he appears, and that's something that can be scary for a lot of other players. He tackles, most of his tackles, as you can see from the tape, come close to the line of scrimmage, and he does a good job of closing down running gaps quickly as he powers through the scrum. He leads into the blockers with a strong shoulder charge, and he establishes leverage against them pretty well. Coaches recognize him as a smart player that will make in-game adjustments himself, and that's not always common among players. Usually they'll wait for coaches to make the decisions. He's not fast, but he recognizes play action very quickly, and he gets into his assigned zone quickly as well. His teammates and coaches recognize McCray as a leader, and an effective one at that. On the flip side, based on his tape and look, you would imagine, and you'd be right too as well, that he doesn't have the best speed, and that's going to hurt him in today's NFL. He's not going to be a three-down linebacker where he has to play in coverage often. He just doesn't have the speed, agility, or pursuit abilities to be someone that can be relied upon in coverage. When he was tasked with man coverage in rare instances at Michigan, he resorted to a lot of tugging and grabbing too. That's not a good equation right there. He also dealt with shoulder injuries that I mentioned before, and teams have to be concerned about that considering he lost his entire 2015 season. Obviously, a player that's not very fast and has dealt with injuries is liable to get slower as well. So the bottom line on McCray is that 10 to 20 years ago, he'd have been a first-round prospect type of pick. A physical force in the running game, a tough leader on and off the field, McCray demands the attention of both the players and coaches on the field and in the running game. But a slower player already, injuries have really slowed him down, and that's hurt his range, which limits his upside in today's NFL. He could fit in as a thumper in a 3-4 scheme with a faster guy next to him, but he'll likely never be the guy in the middle of the defense. He's projected to be taken between rounds 4 and 5. So now that we've heard about Mike McCray from the University of Michigan, who is your fourth inside linebacker prospect, Austin?
My fourth is Jannard Avery from Memphis. He is 6'1" and 255 pounds. When Avery came to Memphis, he made an immediate impact as a freshman. Despite only starting one of the 13 games he played, he managed to lead the team in sacks with 5 anyway. Seeing as he could contribute more as a backfield disruptor, in 2015 he got to start 7 of the 11 games, making 53 tackles, 6.5 for loss, and having 3 sacks. In his junior year, he became the full-time starter and led the team with 11 tackles for a loss on 81 tackles, and also getting 5 sacks, 2 fumbles, and 2 interceptions that both went for touchdowns. Before his senior year, Avery worked with former NFL All-Pro and now linebacker guru Chuck Smith. Smith helped develop guys like Von Miller and Aaron Donald to become what they are today, and helped Avery to the point where coaches and NFL scouts took notice to the improvement in his game. That season, he started all 13 games and gained himself first-team All-American Athletic Conference recognition for his 80 tackles. And before I tell you the number, take a guess on how many tackles for a loss he got on 80 tackles.
23.
Ooh, you're pretty good. You got 22. 22, that is above 25% of his tackles are for a loss. That ranked top 10 in the FBS. Then he also got 8.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups, and 2 forced fumbles. Then he decided to declare for the draft. Well, I failed to mention it in his little overview, he's a state champion powerlifter, and he really showed his strength on the bench press, having the 4th most reps of all middle linebackers. It also helped him have the build of a tank on his lower body as well with all that training. I want to go back to his combine stats, though. He really just impressed at the combine. He ran a 4.59 40, had a 36-inch vertical, and a 6.9 second cone drill to go along with his 26 bench press reps. He really has all the athletic ability you want, as he gives teams a lot to work with. Then he also doesn't end up on his back a lot. He has a very good balance through contact as well as very good body control. Then he's pretty versatile. While I'm looking at him as an inside linebacker, he has experience as an outside linebacker, and he can play special teams as well. Then based on his 2017 season, he really upped his pass rush game with the help of Chuck Smith. He used his hands a lot to get the tackler's hands out of the way, and used a well-timed slap move to get blockers' hands off of him as they do get their hands on him. He also got a tougher in his pass rush, and scrapping and scrambling if he doesn't win the first half of the rep to get involved in the second half. Finally, he impressed scouts with better than anticipated sink and flow in space, and will be able to play over tight ends in the NFL. So on the flip side of things, I commend the way he uses his hands. He still needs to get some work on his hand usage at the point of attack. Against blockers, he tends to drop his eyes and in turn lose the football, and also tries to work around them rather than just punching in and taking control of the play. If he's going to transition to outside linebacker or edge, he's going to have to need more work creating a rush plan, as his pass rush is tight-hipped around the edge. And as for his inside linebacker skills, his instincts and analysis of play is below average, and that would cause him to struggle quite a bit. Finally, as a tackler, he defaults to arm tackles rather than full-on wrap tackles, and will sometimes gather feet into contact and not let loose on the ball carrier because of it. Well, Avery is a big, strong, athletic, and versatile, and I think that really helps his draft stock a lot, as he's definitely more of a player that's going to need time to develop to play, as his pass rushing ability isn't where scouts want it to be, and he lacks instincts as an inside linebacker. But what he can offer immediately is special teams help. So for that, I think Avery is going in the 4th or early 5th round, but analysts think 5th or 6th, but I just think he, like Josie Jewell, is being underrated, especially with all his upside. I think he has way too much upside to be still there in the 5th, in the 6th round. I don't think there's a chance. So that was Jannard Avery out of Memphis. Who is your 4th prospect?
I think I forgot to mention that Mike McCray, my previous prospect from Michigan, was projected to go between the 4th and 5th round. So I just wanted to clarify that before I get started. All right, my 4th prospect is Andre Smith from the University of North Carolina. So, Smith, the 6', 240-pound player, that seems kind of like an interesting frame you've got right there. He has a unique situation going on for him, though. It's not unheard of, though, but it's the first time I've seen it in a prospect I've evaluated in either this year's draft or last year's. So, to elaborate, let me ask you if you've heard of this before, Austin. Smith had a terrific 2017 season. It was going very well at the start of the year. He racked up 21 tackles and an interception, but he suffered a season-ending injury in Week 2. Instead of trying to improve his draft stock after a good 2016 season, he declared for the draft to avoid another injury. So, have you heard of that type of situation before?
Honestly, not that I can remember. Who are you thinking of? Who do you have in mind right now?
Jadeveon Clowney, actually.
Oh, you smart man. I was thinking Steelers. I was like, what?
But in any case, Smith, he suffered a season-ending injury in Week 2, and scouts were concerned about that, obviously, but they were impressed with his 2016 season. He started in 12 of 13 games that year, and he made a crazy 113 tackles, 6 of which went for a loss, and he had 3 pass breakups. He played in all 14 games as a reserve his freshman season, making 53 tackles, 2 for a loss with 1 pick and a forced fumble. So the strengths about Smith, he looks to be a little short in the NFL for a linebacker, but he certainly doesn't play like it. He could very well be the most physical linebacker in this year's draft. He has some good competition too. In his highlight tape, he made several nice plays, including impressive tackles against current NFL players like James Conner and Dalvin Cook. Smith is almost impossible to move in the middle of the field, especially on running plays. He challenges blockers with a punishing lead charge. Even if he's met with a tough block, he does a good job of disengaging and shedding the block. You can clearly see in his tape that he has a great fundamental approach to tackling, and he takes a lot of pride in it. So not only will he hit the ball carrier hard, but he has great technique, and that makes him someone that ball carriers are not going to want to see in the hole. He always plays square to the line of scrimmage on running plays, and inside the tackle box, he does a great job of reading what the running back is doing, waiting for him to pick a hole before Smith will close it. Another example of how physical he is, coaches say that Smith sees every time he gets to make a tackle, he sees it as a challenge, or as a chance, rather, to challenge the player he's up against to see how physical they are. Because he played against so many different running schemes while in North Carolina and the ACC, he recognizes what type of play the offensive is running pretty quickly, and he prepares himself effectively against cutback lanes and zone rushing plays. He was also tasked with getting the defense lined up and handled some signal calling duties on defense. Some of the bad, though, in Smith's game, obviously you have to be concerned with his long-term durability and his ability to make an impact like he did in college when he's coming off of a season-ending knee injury like he had. Smith doesn't have great lateral quickness, and he's noticeable on toss plays and these other outside runs that you'll see. He doesn't change direction quickly when running or engaged with a blocker, meaning if he gets washed down by a block in which he was charging forward, he's going to keep getting washed down because he doesn't shift his weight or his momentum towards where he's being blocked. So basically, if he's going to be blocked by a trapping guard, it's over for him. He's going to lose that battle every time. He's not athletic, and it shows. He's not fast or agile, and he's not flexible either, so he's not going to pull down these crazy interceptions. You combine that with his struggles to recognize some passing plays, especially play action, it's not a good combination for someone who's an aspiring every-down linebacker. He can't hold up in man coverage straight up. So he's basically a guy that can't cover in extended stretches at all. So he's entrenched as a two-down linebacker. So off the bat, when it comes to Smith, you have to be worried about if he can be the player he was before his season-ending injury in the first place. If you can get past that, you're going to see that he's a great run defender, especially up the middle. He's physical and a great tackler, but he lacks athleticism, coverage skills, and instincts, meaning he's, again, as I said, strictly a two-down linebacker. He'll see limited playing time in the NFL. He still has a place in this league, though, but he's a projected mid to late round selection. I would expect him to be drafted, though, but don't expect it to be sometime until around the 4th or 5th, maybe even the 6th round. So that was Andre Smith from the University of North Carolina. Who is your fifth and final inside linebacker prospect?
My fifth and final is to Grace Scales from Indiana. He's 6 foot and 230 pounds. I want to say first, for some reason, it was really hard to find his highlights. Like, I've always watched, for every player, basically since tight ends, I watched their highlights, and I watched a few of their gameplays, like a few of their games on YouTube. But for some reason, to Grace Scales, just no one wanted to make highlights for him. No one wanted to give him career highlights. And it's not like he's a really late-round pick. It's just, I don't know why. People don't like Indiana or something. I guess Indiana's not a big football school, whatever. And anyway, that's my little rant over. In high school, Scales was an Ohio Associated Press Division I co-defensive player of the year as a senior, but that wasn't really enough to have colleges want to recruit him as much as you would think. Standing at 6 foot and only 206 pounds, I guess you could say colleges didn't exactly tip the scales. However, Indiana recruited him and it paid off for them. In his freshman year, he earned freshman All-American honors as well as I'm going to have to ask your help on this one. I forgot to look it up. Is it Hoosiers? Hoosiers?
First of all, boo on your pun, and Hoosiers.
Hoosiers. Okay, thank you. And my pun was great. Stop. I set that up and I was so happy about it. But the Hoosiers Defensive Newcomer of the Year with 46 tackles, 4.5 for a loss, and 2 games. In 2015, he was still a reserve, but got even better with 64 tackles, 5.5 for a loss, 3 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 4 pass breakups. And 8 of those tackles came in the team's last game against Duke in the Pinstripe Bowl. 2016 was his first season as a starter and was a team captain for the year. He went on to win the team's MVP, won MVP in the Foster Farm Bowl against Utah, was second-team All-American, and was second-team All-Big Ten. That year, he led the country in tackles for a loss with 23.5 on 126 tackles, and 7 of them being sacks. That, however, was his best season, and the production went down in his senior year, but he still had respectable numbers, getting 89 tackles, 12.5 for a loss, 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 2 fumble recoveries, earning himself second-team All-Big Ten in his senior season. So what's good about him is he's been so productive in college because of his elite instincts and high-end football IQ. He sniffs out the direction of the play instantaneously and gets into the action as soon as possible. He never waits for the action to come to him. Speaking of getting to the play, he takes quality angles to get to his target and is able to adjust the angle based on the traffic. Against blockers, he's shown to be decent, limiting run lane depth by challenging climbing linemen, and using his shoulder turn and hand quickness to help get around and play under blocks, and then also uses punches to separate from blocks, hardly ever getting stuck on a block for long. In coverage, he is shown to have decent cover skills in space and also can give strong redirect routes if he wants to. He also has pretty solid hands as he finished his career with 8 interceptions. Then the 2 final good things about him is that he's a vocal leader on defense for Indiana, and I think he can translate to the NFL. And he also has coverage teams talent, so he can immediately contribute on special teams. So on the flip side of things, Scales wasn't really gifted physically. He's actually undersized for a middle linebacker, and his frame may be maxed out. Then similar to Jewell, he's very slow, having the 6th slowest 40-yard dash time amongst linebackers in the draft with a 4.78 second 40-yard dash time. Even Even before the combine, though, scouts have been questioning his pursuit speed and closing burst to get to guys, as he already plays with some delay in his acceleration, especially when changing direction. Then against blockers, he's going to have to get better at striking and shutting at the point of attack, maintaining gap leverage, and also get better at not widening the run lane when sidestepping his blocker. Then as a tackler, he's slid off a lot of blocks while he was diving in college. He's got to get better at wrapping people up. Finally, he needs to be careful about avoiding backside containment when he's flowing wide. So while Scales probably had the least negatives out of any single prospect I looked at, they're big negatives. You just can't fix size, and he's already maxed out, if not close. There's very little you could do about his speed as well. It's just, you could do a little, but it's not much going to happen. He has great football IQ and instincts, as well as special teams talent that will help him get drafted in the 5th round, probably early 5th round too, at that. So that's what to look out for. So that was my 5th and final prospect. That is Tegray Scales out of Indiana. Who is your 5th and final prospect?
My 5th and final prospect is Azim Victor from Washington, the 6'1", 230-pound senior. He had, let's just put it this way. It was another unique situation for Victor. He looked like a budding star in 2015 and 2016, but he has fallen quite far from where he once was. He had a chance to leave school after a terrific junior season that saw him making a first-team All-Pac-12, earning first-team All-Pac-12 honors. However, Victor decided to stay at school for one more year, and that's probably something he's kicking himself for today. He started in just 5 of 9 games while only making 30 tackles with 2 sacks, and he was suspended twice during the season, once at the end of the season after being charged with a DUI. He was notably more aggressive and slower on the field this year as well, aggressive not in a good way. Previously, however, Victor was a standout player, recording 67 tackles, 3 for a loss as a junior, and as a sophomore he started 11 of 13 games and was named an All-Pac-12 honorable mention by racking up 95 tackles, 9 for a loss with 1.5 sacks and a pick 6. He played in 10 games as a special teams contributor his freshman season, racking up 5 tackles. So the strengths about Victor, he's a diligent worker and a hard defender on the backside when he plays. On the strong side, however, he doesn't overshoot his target, opening up other running lanes. He has natural instincts at the inside linebacker position, and he's quick to pull the trigger on running plays, both downhill and on the perimeter. Victor has great leverage, and he's taught with good fundamentals as he forces the ball carrier to the outside with the strong base. He meets a climbing combination blocker with force and will usually drive them back as he meets the ball carrier with physicality. He seems to get faster when he knows he's about to hit somebody. Victor has experience chipping tight ends and trying to intimidate running backs with pops as he blitzes them. Victor also has experience at reading the quarterback in zone coverage. He'll often let the quarterback's eyes dictate where the throw is going on the inside, and at the college level, this means that Victor is almost always correct. He plays screens well too, undercutting blockers if he reads the play fast enough, and he was a core special teams player even when he was a starter, so it's clear that he can contribute there even on an NFL team if he becomes a starter or not. On the other side, though, Victor, as I mentioned in the overview, he was suspended twice in his final season. He was suspended a total of 3 times in his career. Most of the problems scouts have come from this past season, where he was heavier than he had been in years past, and it certainly showed on tape. He was a lot slower and less agile. Coaches noticed, and they benched him last year for large portions as he only played in just over half of his team's games. And when you're trying to make it to the NFL, that's not a good look. He's just not agile right now. He looks so much slower after putting on weight, and a lot of his movements look robotic, and they're not fluid, so that just slows him down too. His pursuit and speed and burst just aren't where they need to be right now, again, because he was slowed down last year. He needs to learn how to use his hands because he doesn't know what to do and he gets engaged with bigger linemen, and he gets stuck to them too. And as for the player he is right now, he's going to struggle in man coverage, period. And beyond that, he struggled in finding his man after play action passes too. All of this was not as bad prior to his senior year, I should point out. So the bottom line with Victor, he looked like a day 2 pick before last year, but he really looked like a different player, and that's not a compliment this past season. Adding the suspension and the benching on top of that, and you've got a prospect sliding way down the boards. Now, it's certainly possible that once he gets to the NFL, he'll change his attitude, he'll get to the right place, he'll drop some weight, and with the proper leaders and a good coaching staff, he'll become a good contributor. But as we've been saying all winter, it's hard to project a player based off of 2-year-old tape and statistics. He has the potential to be that run-and-gun player the Steelers need on the inside, but it's a long shot right now. And he slid in mock drafts to the 6th and 7th round, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't get drafted at all with all of his baggage and he becomes a priority UDFA instead, undrafted free agent. So, that is my fifth and final prospect, Azim Victor. Now that we've looked at all 10 inside linebacker prospects, let's rank our prospects that we looked at, Austin. So give me your 5 guys.
I'm going to pick Van Der Esch first. I think he makes sense as a Steelers linebacker. I think all of his problems are fixable. And if he's there, the Steelers should definitely take the gamble and get him. I mean, it's not really even that much of a gamble. It's only a gamble because he's only really been a starter for one season. But he looked good in that one season, and all his problems had to do with strength. If he gets his strength up, he was basically, I think he could be an elite linebacker. After him is Jannard Avery. I just think that he's the biggest sleeper in this draft. He has high-level production after working with the same guys Von Miller and Aaron Donald did. So I am all on board on the Jannard Avery train. I think that teams are underestimating him. And they're underestimating the work of what Chuck Smith has done to these guys coming out of college. And granted, Von Miller and Aaron Donald were first-round guys, but that's because they got to work with Chuck Smith for a while. This was only 1 year for Jannard Avery, so I think I have high hopes for him, to be honest with you. After this, it really came down to who's the better tackler, and that leaves Josie Jewell coming next. And it sounds weird as Jewell was slower, but it looked like to great scales had really slow play speed. I felt like Jewell was still getting there in his tape, and that's what really pushed him over for me, him and his more surefire tackling. I don't know why, because Jewell ran a slower 40. It just looked like to great scales just wasn't as fast in the actual game. But as I said, Scales comes next. I think he has a lot to offer. I just really hate his play speed and acceleration. It's going to be very hard to work with for most teams. And that leaves Kaiser for last. Kaiser is the only one of my prospects I didn't really like and I wouldn't want the Steelers to take. I just felt unimpressed. There was just a lot to his negatives. He was slow and literally couldn't play man in college. Like, it was awful. And I know the Steelers run mostly zone, but, like, putting Kaiser out there on any man coverage play is not an option. So that leaves him last. That was a problem that I couldn't overlook, and unfortunately that left him to be last. So how do you rank your prospects?
Well, unlike you, Austin, most of the prospects I looked at, I actually didn't really like that all that much. The guy I did really like, though, was Rashaan Evans, and I know you were kind of wishy-washy on him before, and the groin injury is, yes, a little concerning, but he's both athletic and physical. His tape was very good, and he was a presence on almost every play. I think he'd fit in very well at either linebacker spot on the inside for Pittsburgh. I'd be very happy to see him there. He just knows how to play. He played behind NFL talent, and he became a good player. He played in the big game several times. He played well, and, 25 years ago, no one would know anything about the groin injury, and that's not something that's really career-debilitating, groin injuries. So as long as it's nursed back to health, I don't think there's going to be any problem with him in Pittsburgh, to be honest with you. Second is Jerome Baker, and I did like him. He's a little undersized, and he's not physical enough, so he needs to beef up, but he would fill a void in the middle of the field with his athleticism and his coverage potential. He's certainly not a bad reconciliation prize if the Steelers miss out on their top two guys. Third, I had Azim Victor, and I would only want to see him in Pittsburgh as a 7th-round selection or a UDFA. He at least has the potential to be someone in the mix at the MAC linebacker position at some point, but he's not an immediate fix, and questions about his discipline, weight, and play last year had me very concerned. I would stay away from him. Last, I've combined Mike McCray and Andre Smith because nothing against these two guys, but they just aren't what the Steelers need. They're both really good run defenders, they're physical, they're leaders, and they have good instincts, but they lack the athleticism, overall speed, and coverage capabilities to even be considered for the Steelers here. They basically have 3 inside linebackers with this kind of mold already, that being Vince Williams, Tyler Matakevich, and John Bostic to some extent. So adding another guy just like that seems like a waste to me, because you're not fixing the current problem on the defense, but That's nothing against them. I think they're all pretty good players, but I just don't think that it makes sense to add those guys to Pittsburgh right now. All right, so that concludes our last look at position players for at least the schedule right now. We'll take a look at additional prospects in a little bit before the draft, but it's on pretty much the NFL draft now, Austin. Do you have any final thoughts about how we did this year? Did you like it? Is there something you would have changed? Just quick thoughts about your second year.
I think I liked it. I didn't see really a problem with it. We basically did the same as last year, except we covered way more prospects this year because we honestly combined our O-line and safety preview this year. When I think for O-line we only did three in total, and then for safety we only looked at 3 in total as well, and because we both did solo episodes. So this is good. We actually got this one done on time this year in good timing, and we still have room to look at the other pre-draft visitors. So I like how we did it.
And let's not forget we looked at long snappers this year just in case.
Oh yeah, that too. We got the specialists involved.
I definitely liked what we did better, like what we did this year better, and I think we can always continue to improve. But one step at a time, and I think I always enjoy looking at this. I really enjoyed looking around the NFL when the Steelers were playing games last year and being like, you know what, I remember hearing about that guy, or I remember, what happened to that guy, and I remember we always talked about what happened to Javance Jones, your last mock draft pick last year, stuff like that. So it's certainly very enlightening to me, and it's very nice to see when you do hit on something like when we both got T.J. Watt or Brian Allen or I know there was another player. What's his name? Cooper Kupp from the Rams. You were really high on him too, and he turned out to be a really good receiver too. So it's a rewarding process for us too. So we wanted to thank everyone for sticking with us for that. So before we wrap this up, there's been a lot going on in the NFL the last few days, so let's get to it. So first things first, C.J. Anderson, the running back for the Denver Broncos, was released. What did you think about that?
I think a team after the draft should scoop him. I'd be surprised if he got picked up before that, though, as we were close to the draft. But I was talking to my Broncos fan friend, and I was very surprised. We were talking about it. I was surprised that the Broncos couldn't get any trade value out of him at all, like even just swapping 7th-round picks. I guess teams didn't want to eat his contract, but it wasn't the worst contract in the world in my eyes. I thought that to secure C.J. Anderson on your team, it would have been worth switching 7th-round picks, but unfortunately the Broncos got nothing out of it. What do you think of this move?
He's coming off a career year as far as rushing attempts and yards go, and that should really tell you all you need to know about what the running back position is in the NFL now. And on one end, it can make you understand why some running backs are trying to get as much money as they can, Lev Bell. But at the same time, you have to understand that they don't make a lot of money because they're not worth that much because they can easily be replaced, Lev Bell. So, regardless of what you think, running backs have become devalued, and even when they produce like Anderson did, they can still get cut. Another player that is in danger of getting cut was the Seattle Seahawks' first pick of the 2017 draft, the number 35 overall pick, Malik McDowell. He was never medically cleared, so just to preface this, he was involved in an ATV accident a few weeks before training camp last season and suffered, quote, brain and eye trauma. He had never been cleared, and now his NFL career is up in the air. So what do you make of all this?
It sucks his career was quite possibly over before it started. I just hope he gets a chance. It kind of sucks to have your career thrown down the drain because I thought he was going to be a first-round pick last year, and it got ended. It's over, and his chance of being an NFL star might be over, but I hope he gets cleared because even when he gets cleared, he's going to be highly wanted by teams because he was a young guy that was drafted really high. They obviously saw something in him. He was almost a first-round draft pick. So I think that if he ever gets cleared, he's going to be highly wanted by teams. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation all around. He believes he'll be able to play in the NFL again, but no one seems to know if he's ever going to be cleared. And I hope for him that he will, but I wouldn't bet my house on it either. But time will tell, and I hope I'm wrong. The NFL's at it again, Austin. Them and the Patriots with their nonsense. All of a sudden, a story comes out just a few days before the draft that Tom Brady's still contemplating his future about whether or not he wants to play after saying he wants to play till 50 and beyond just, a year ago. It never ends with them, does it?
No, this is just stupid. He's playing. I don't really have much else to contribute. He's just being dramatic. That's about it. Or the news outlets are being dramatic. He hasn't really even said anything. It's mostly just news outlets. So he's playing. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. Why wouldn't he play? That's asinine. I mean, geez. And beyond that, the draft is in, at the time, it was 8 days away. The NFL's just slugging along, just trying to get to the draft because they got nothing to talk about right now. 12th year pro Nick Mangold, the center of the New York Jets, announced his retirement. A 7-time Pro Bowler and 3-time All-Pro, Mangold hasn't played since the middle of the 2016 season after dealing with injuries. Is he a Pro Football Hall of Famer?
I don't think so. He's a fan favorite of Jets fans, but I wouldn't say Hall of Fame worthy. He might be a Ring of Honor worthy, but other than that, I can't really say he's going to be a Hall of Famer. What do you think?
I don't think so either. He was only first-team All-Pro twice, but then again, he could make it. I wouldn't be that surprised if he did, but I'm going to say no right now. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers picked up the $20.9 million fifth-year option for quarterback Jameis Winston in 2019. How has he performed after being the first pick in the 2015 draft? And that notice that some players are getting picked up with their option. Be aware that Bud Dupree's option could be picked up or declined pretty soon here.
Well, Winston has been not awful, not great either, but more leaning towards the bad side than good. I would compare his overall performance thus far as comparable to Ryan Tannehill's. Tannehill isn't good, but he's not complete trash either. They're both just average quarterbacks. That means they have some good games, they have some bad games. It's just how it goes. Winston really has a great arm, but his accuracy isn't so hot, in my opinion. I'm not sure he'll be the Buccaneers' long-time starter, but it's going to be a hard decision for the Bucs because he could be. It's almost this one's a little bit worse, but it's almost like the Alex Smith problem, where Alex Smith is just average. Can he be your franchise quarterback? And for the Chiefs, he was for a little bit, and for the 49ers, he lasted a few years, but still, I think Winston is worse than Smith's averageness. Definitely Winston's below that, so it's going to be a hard decision for the Bucs after this season, but what do you think?
It's another interesting scenario showing you what the NFL is like at the quarterback position now. He's been decent, but he hasn't been the elite player you'd want the number 1 overall pick to be. His numbers are pretty good, though. I can't say how much of the team's struggles can be placed on him, though. I think it makes sense to give him the option, though, because the fact is finding capable quarterbacks is hard to do in this league. Depending on how next year goes, they could actually look to draft his replacement then and have him learn under that system for a year and then take over for Winston the following year. All right, so the news today is that 6-time Pro Bowl receiver Brandon Marshall was cut by the New York Giants a day after, talking about Dez Bryant and they weren't going to have money to sign him. Well, the releasing of Marshall, and now a video has come out with Bryant working out with OBJ. Maybe it looks a lot more likely that Bryant's going to sign with the New York Giants. He had previously been rumored to be looking at the Ravens and the Saints, but it's looking like the Giants are the team that's the favorite for landing him right now. Do you have any thoughts?
I think that Dez is trash. That is literally all I have to say. Dez is trash, and the Giants are trash for opening up a spot for him. I mean, Brandon Marshall was absolutely bad, too, so I guess it's not the worst move. If Dez Bryant comes for cheaper than Brandon Marshall was there, it's a W, but it's a lateral movement in terms of play. Brandon Marshall, I guess Dez Bryant was actually probably better than Brandon Marshall. I shouldn't say that far. Brandon Marshall did absolutely nothing for the Giants this year, but still.
He was You're going from a guy that's younger and healthier, so at the very least, that's better. So it's not lateral, but it's not that much of an upgrade either. But we'll see. We will see. We'll talk about the NFL schedules that were released in a little bit. The Dolphins and Jaguars unveiled new uniforms. I know you sent me the video of the Dolphins. They look exactly the same as they had. Could you find what the actual difference was?
I'm sorry, say that again? I missed that.
The Dolphins uniforms. You sent me that video. Could you actually tell if they're any different?
No, I really couldn't. Not in the Dolphins uniforms anyway.
I believe they might be a little lighter of a turquoise, bluish, greenish color. I don't know. But the real change happened in Jacksonville. The Jacksonville Jaguars, thanks to Tom Coughlin and his ingenuity, have finally ditched the disgusting look of the poop brown and black, half shade helmet that might have been, and probably was, in my opinion, the worst helmet design in NFL history, in football history, maybe even sports history. And finally, that's been gone in favor of a solid black helmet with a solid black face mask. I personally like that. And as far as the uniform changes go, I don't think there's a ton, but I agree with what you told me earlier, which had referred to the use of certain colors on their away uniforms.
Yeah, I was not a fan of their away uniforms at all. I feel like my favorite color of the Jaguars is their blue. And also, a big part of their colors is that yellow. And while it is a bad yellow, or gold, or whatever you want to call it, or brown, they completely did away with it in their away uniforms. I'm actually curious. I honestly haven't taken a look at their schedules. I don't really know it yet. But if they play the Oakland Raiders at the Oakland, at Oco Stadium, that's going to be confusing. Their jerseys look literally, they're just black and white. They're not anything different. They're literally just black and white. And there's not even the blue on there. The only blue noticeable was their socks, their gloves, and I think there was the Nike symbol was blue. The yellow was completely gone out of that jersey completely. I don't like it. I wasn't a fan. It was too minimalistic, and it wasn't even their colors. I feel like I'm not going to put that together with the Jaguars. It doesn't remind me of Jaguars. Their other jerseys are fantastic. They made them mostly blue and black. They focused on those being their two colors. And blue and black does make me think of the Jaguars. It's still minus the yellow, which they basically done away on all of their uniforms, but still just not a fan of those away jerseys. It just doesn't make me think Jaguars. It makes me think Raiders.
I definitely can understand that. So that I don't believe they play the Raiders because the Steelers play the AFC West this year, and the Chiefs won the division, so they're going to be playing the Chiefs, the Jaguars are. So no Raiders this year. Dwight Freeney just announced his retirement. He plans on signing a one-day contract with the Colts to finish his career after 16 seasons in the NFL, the 11th pick out of the 2002 draft. Hall of Famer, right?
I think so. I think he should make it there. I think for all his production, he should.
I don't know if he was ever the best pass rusher in the league, but I think he was a top 5 pass rusher for probably about a 10-year stretch, which is enough, in my opinion. All right. So we are on to the schedule releases. At 8 p.m., the NFL released their schedule, and we got the first look at the Steelers' schedule. So we're going to be putting it up here, but just for those who won't see it, we'll run through it real quick. So, Week 1, the Steelers are in Cleveland, just like they were last year. September 9th, that's a 1 p.m. kickoff. Week 2, September 16th, they're home against the Kansas City Chiefs, 1 p.m. Week 3, it's a Monday Night Football game at Tampa Bay on September 24th. Week 4, they're back home, Sunday Night Football, September 30th against the Baltimore Ravens. Week 5, hosting the Falcons on October 7th at 1 p.m. Week 6, they're at Cincinnati October 14th at 1 p.m. Their bye week, Week 7. Week 8, October 28th, hosting the Browns at 1. Week 9, at Baltimore on November 4th at 1. Week 10, Thursday night game, hosting the Panthers at 8:20 on November 8th. Week 11, November 18th, they're at Jacksonville. That's a Sunday night game. Week 12, November 25, they're at Denver. That's a 4:25 kickoff. Week 13, they're hosting the Los Angeles Chargers at 1 p.m. December 2nd. Week 14, December 9th, they're at Oakland. That's also a Sunday night game. Week 15, primetime, not primetime, but later CBS game 425, December 16th against the New England Patriots for the second year in a row. Week 16 at New Orleans Saints, December 23rd at 425, and then they conclude the season for the first time since 2014 against a team that's not the Cleveland Browns. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. The Steelers host the Bengals the day before New Year's Eve, December 30th at 1 p.m. Quick thoughts and observations from the schedule?
I hate versing Bengals last. I think that is the worst thing ever. I would have rather versed the Ravens last, make it a battle for the division or something. Versing the Bengals last just makes me think someone is going to get injured, and that final damn week, because it's the Bengals. Like, I already am worried for week 6 against the Bengals, where Juju gets to see Vontaze again, as we get to see Vontaze as he only got a 4-week suspension, 4-game, I'm sorry. And I just don't like the idea of finishing off against them. Those games are always dirty between both teams trying to kill each other. I'm not a fan. Other than that, I really am worried about the NFC South. The Patriots, Falcons, and Panthers are all very strong teams. And then you're also facing the Patriots, Saints, Bengals in the final 3 weeks. And Bengals aren't really an issue apart from the thing I said. But that last stretch against the Patriots and Saints, that's really rough. And then a division rival that's not the Browns. It's a really rough ending. What do you think?
Weeks 14 through 16 look very tough. The Steelers usually struggle out west too. So you've got a quick turnaround there with those 3 games. That's tough. Obviously, Jacksonville concerns me. The Steelers are hosting their Thursday night game again this year. I feel good about that. I think the Steelers could run the table early on in the year, and I think they're going to need that because we just talked about the end of their season looks pretty tough. From about week 9 or 10 on, it looks pretty much like a gauntlet up until the last week, doesn't it?
Yeah, honestly. Basically, the only breaks they get, and honestly, I think this team has struggled against the Raiders in the past, but it would be the Raiders and the Broncos. And that's also dependent on Case Keenum, if Case Keenum's good or if Broncos draft a quarterback and he starts by then. It's really dependent. That second half is going to be sort of nasty. I also think the Chargers are sneaky, so I'll watch out for them.
It's never easy playing in Denver either, but I guess, again, the point is it's never an easy time in the NFL. So we'll have a more in-depth and thorough analysis of the Steelers schedule in our next episode, but thank you so much for joining us this offseason for our pre-draft coverage. We'll have one more kind of analysis on prospects the Steelers head in for visits, but we're a week away from the NFL draft, so keep an eye out for our mock drafts. They'll be out soon. And it's been a great time, so thank you so much. And if you have any questions about the show, email us at strongerthansteelpodcast@gmail.com. Check us out on Twitter at @stronger_steel. We're on Instagram at @stronger_steel_NFL. We're on Facebook at Stronger Than Steel Podcast. You can also find us under that name on SoundCloud and YouTube and iTunes as well. We post our episodes there. And you can check out our website, strongerthansteelnfl.blogspot.com. Austin, thank you so much for joining me today. One step closer to the NFL draft. In a week's time, we will know who the newest Pittsburgh Steeler will be. Can't wait.
Yeah, man, I'm so excited. Almost time for that draft. Finally, some more NFL news that's worthy of being excited about.
Alrighty then. Until next time, thank you for listening to the Stronger Than Steel podcast.
Have a good night.
You have been listening to Stronger Than Steel podcast. Thank you for joining us today, and don't forget to check out our website listed in the description below.